You get to decide what is a meaningful outcome for you, and therefore what is productive. Being productive is not the same thing as being busy. Being productive is not the same thing as just doing more things. It's not the same thing as having great time management. None of these things are productive unless they are helping you live your life in the way that you want to live it, achieving the goals that are important. So the first part about building the productivity system is just defining productivity. Most people, if I say, what are the goals and the outcomes that you want to achieve? They can give me a list of like 10, 15 different things. Refine that down to just 2 or 3 of what you think are the most meaningful outcomes that you want to optimize towards. So for me, I want to build great learning products that help people learn to learn and use their brain in the best way. And I want to build a successful business around that. But I want to achieve that goal while enjoying the journey and not burning out and actually feeling fulfilled in my everyday life. And that's a really important goal for me. So as a result, going out with friends, having hobbies, working out, getting enough sleep, these are all highly productive things. That's what allows me to achieve that goal. And it doesn't fill me with the guilt that it used to fill me with when I wasn't clear about what productivity really means for me. So that's part 1, define productivity. The second part is to do what I call flow matching. And this is really simple. All you're going to do is write down all the tasks that you need to do for the week. And next to those tasks, you figure out how complex and cognitively involved those tasks are likely to be. And the idea is that if you were to draw this graph, time on the x-axis and your productivity on the y, then as your day goes on, your productivity usually starts pretty high, and then you get more and more tired. And if you do something to recover energy, then that productivity might dip again, but then as you do more thinking, you're going to get more tired again. And this is essentially tracking your energy level throughout the day, the ability for your brain to really focus and do these complex tasks. So if you've got this big task that's really complicated, requires a lot of deep thinking, and you do it here or here, then your brain is not in a great position to do that. And so you're going to need to spend more time doing it, which is wasted time. It's going to be harder to get the outcome that you want. And when you do create some kind of output, the chances are that the quality of it is actually going to be lower. And so ideally, you want to do these big tasks here, where you are in your cognitive peak. And when you are down here and you're a little bit more tired, this is when you should do some more of those admin tasks, the things that don't require so much concentration. And this is what flow matching means. You are matching the time of the day where you are at your cognitive peak with the actual activity that you're doing. And flow matching is what dictates what your daily schedule actually looks like. It tells you which tasks you're going to do when during the day in which order. And obviously within reason, because you can't necessarily control every single task that you do during the day, but for the parts that you can control, you try to abide by this principle. And flow matching is really important because by putting your brain in the optimum state to do that task, it reduces the amount of wasted time and wasted energy. So for every hour that you're putting in, you're getting more return, more bang for your buck. And it helps to avoid what is the worst case scenario where out of the time that you have put it in, you haven't been able to reach the output or the result that you needed. And so now you're in a situation where you have to compensate for that by putting in more time. And that almost always does not work. In fact, there's this book that I read a few years ago called Diminishing Returns at Work, written by John Pencavel. What he sort of says is that as the amount of hours you spend on work increases per week, if this is your productivity on the y-axis again, initially, as you put in more hours, your productivity goes up, but then it starts to plateau. And then over time, it actually goes down. So as you put in more hours, your productivity reduces. And so this point at which you're getting diminishing returns is at about 50 hours. And what he said in the book is that someone who was working 70 hours is actually only producing about as much output as someone that works 55 hours. So your productivity actually drops so sharply after 50 hours that the additional 15 hours is basically wasted time. And I personally felt this myself because I used to be working 100, 120 hours a week, working as a junior doctor while simultaneously running a business full time. And then I quit medicine. I quit being a doctor and I spent all of that time just working on my business. But even though I was spending double or triple the amount of time, the actual business outcomes that I was able to create for myself didn't really change by much. And fast forward to now, I work 40 to 50 hours a week. I'm not doing those crazy hours anymore at all, but I'm more productive than I've ever been. And that is because of the time that I'm spending, a very high percentage of that time is producing really high quality work deep in flow. And flow matching makes that process much easier. So we've now got a first part of a ritual that we can start building to form your productivity system. That Sunday evening, Saturday evening, whenever you're going to do your planning, you start by writing down the list of tasks and then flow matching it, putting that into your schedule. Now, when you do that, you're going to have some tasks that you know historically you maybe are not going to be able to complete. It might be a little ambitious. A great one is exercise. So let's say Tuesday evening, you want to get to the gym after work. So you schedule it in at 7 p.m. That is your intention. But then Tuesday evening rolls around, situations have changed, and now you're not able to get to the gym anymore. And so instead, let's say you sit on the couch and by the end of the night, you're feeling terrible because you didn't do the thing that you set out to do that you know is good for you. And so for those high risk tasks that we intend to do, once we put them in our schedule, we should identify them and then move on to the third part of our productivity system, which is to create scripted actions. So scripted actions are basically predetermined decisions that you're making for yourself. And it says, if X, then Y. So you scheduled an exercise on Tuesday evening. And so what we're going to do now is think about all the barriers or the conditions, the things that could happen that prevent you from acting on that intention. These are predictable risks. If I finish late from work and therefore I'm not able to pick up the groceries to make dinner in time, and that's a risk. And if I can't make dinner in time, I know I'm going to choose to just make dinner and then not go to the gym. Then we'd say, if I finish late from work and can't pick up the groceries to make dinner, then I'm going to just get takeout that day. You're making that decision in advance, which in this example is because on that day, going to the gym is more important for you. You would deem that as more productive. And again, that is relative to your goals. And you would do that for the other risks that you can think of. And by creating these scripted actions, we're setting ourselves up for success. The research shows that when we use scripted actions, the gap between intention and behavior, i.e. you intending to do something and whether you actually do it or not, that gap reduces by half, which basically means that it is twice as likely that you will do what you set out to do. And this is without becoming less busy, reducing your level of responsibility. It is just by having these decisions made up front. And the reason scripted actions are so powerful is the same reason why you get diminishing returns when you put in too many hours with work. It's the reason why you have cognitive peaks and troughs in the first place. And all of this comes to something called the prefrontal cortex, and specifically a phenomenon which is prefrontal cortex fatigue. So that's PFC fatigue. Your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that is involved in decision making and planning, and executive functioning and coordination. So this is the part of the brain in the human that is more developed than any other species. Most of the really complex big tasks that you need to schedule in your day that you're flow matching, these require prefrontal cortex involvement. And your prefrontal cortex is very energy consuming and it fatigues very quickly. And the reason I'm teaching you about prefrontal cortex fatigue is that once you learn to recognize this is really what makes productivity easy. When you enter into prefrontal cortex fatigue, you will notice a few things. Because it is involved in decision making, you become more reluctant to make decisions. You become increasingly lazy. If you're pushing through and still trying to work despite being in PFC fatigue, the quality of your work is going to go down. And that is a reason why when you push through too many hours, you get this diminishing return on your output, because the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for that output, is no longer really functioning properly. It's got nothing left to give. And so we can say that your productivity is strongly influenced by your prefrontal cortex. And so with scripted actions, what we're trying to do is instead of saying, hey, we're at the end of the day, it's Tuesday evening, you've spent an entire day at work making decisions and solving problems and using your brain. Your prefrontal cortex is fatigued, and now we're coming home late, we didn't get the groceries, and now we have to decide and coordinate again. Are we going to get takeout? Can we afford to get takeout? If I make dinner now and do a grocery run, am I going to get time to go to the gym? If I don't go to the gym today, when will I make it up? This is a lot of complex decision making we have to do, and your PFC is already fatigued. And so if you're in that position, trying to make those decisions with that state of your brain, then you're going to feel lazy and reluctant. It is very difficult to be productive when the engine of your productivity has shut down. It is much easier to have made as many of those decisions up front as possible with our scripted actions, so that when Tuesday evening rolls around, we simply observe what has happened. I've come home late, I already decided what I'm going to do, I'm going to get takeout. You just have to execute. The PFC does not need to be involved in that. It doesn't increase its level of fatigue. But now we have three parts of a productivity system, right? So we have a very clear goal of what we're optimizing towards that might update over time. And then on a Sunday evening, we are writing down all of the tasks. We're figuring out how much concentration and focus it requires. We're scheduling that. We're identifying high-risk tasks, and we're creating scripted actions for them. And when you do this a few times, this process becomes very fast because you tend to have the same scripted actions because the risks are predictable and the tasks repeat. But by taking the time to do this up front, we're setting ourselves up for success for the entire week. When I'm coaching someone and they describe this daily grind of going uphill to create productivity every single day, then that's a red flag that tells me that they're not setting themselves up properly, because most of the productivity